Hey guys, thanks for listening to another episode of Friends with Death Benefits. We have part 2 tonight with funeral director Mike Ewing. We're going to be talking about a lot of really interesting stuff that has to do with that career, as well as how it pertains to grief like we did 2 weeks ago. Thanks for sticking around, guys. Hello everyone, how we doing? Welcome to an episode of Friends with Death Benefits. It's kind of a part 2 episode tonight. We are in the studio again with Mike Ewing, funeral director and now friend, I would say. We are without Tiff tonight. She had some stuff come up. Life gets crazy, we keep rolling. In her place, someone I find to be just as sparkling and attractive is a friend of mine, amazing DJ, fellow comedian, fantastic hockey announcer, and actually our engineer for the show. Joe Malone is with us tonight. How we doing, Joe?
Doing good. Thank you. And the attractiveness is probably mainly because of the mullet, which is...
it's looking good, man.
It's reached capital sick all the way across.
It's truly reached its potential. Yes. It really has. It's come into its own. It really has. For those of you, you're going to have to take our word for it. If you don't know Joe, or look him up on social media just to get it. It's real good. It's a presence to behold. Yeah. For sure.
It's a midlife crisis. I couldn't afford a Ferrari.
Yeah,
so
it's much cheaper.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I still rock the skullet, which just kind of naturally just kind of comes in like that. But we are here. We had such a fun time with Mike last time, talking about his job and how it pertains to grief and all kinds of different things with life, that we decided, hey, let's do it again. We got a bunch more stuff to talk about. Joe's got some questions, I know. It's pretty exciting. We've never had a host and a guest at the same time, so
breaking all kinds of ground.
Yeah, we're breaking new ground. I will give credit to Joe. Actually came up with the name of the show when we did our first episode, so I feel like credit's due where credit's due. You know what I mean? So,
well, you think Friends with Benefits,
yeah,
and you two kind of you and Tiff formed your friendship through your grieving.
We really did.
And so why not Friends with Death Benefits?
It was
and
a good
plus
one.
It's got good shock value to it.
It really does. It's a good name.
Like, wait, what?
No one ever hears it and goes, oh, sure, yeah. They're always like, oh, like,
what?
It's fantastic. But Mike, thanks for being here.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be back.
Yeah.
I got to say, I'm a little bit outgunned with between the mullet and the skullet.
Yeah, man.
The massive beard over there.
Massive beard. I kind of got beard envy, too.
Yeah.
Both you guys have got, like, far, vastly superior facial hair and cranial hair. I just feel like I'm kind of...
You're ready to get jumped into our biker gang is basically
I'm ready
where
to
you're
go.
at.
You kind of look like if me and Joe were one person that didn't make horrible decisions about what to do with our heads.
Oh, I've made plenty of horrible decisions, but, I just can hide them up pretty good.
Cranially speaking, I suppose. But
there you go.
But yeah, I will tell you this. Your episode got more views than any of our episodes in the past several months. People really seemed interested.
That's cool.
I don't know if you just told everybody you knew to give it a listen.
I'm just a social media guru,
but,
and I just put it out there for everybody on every platform. That's great. I'm glad.
Yeah, it was. I think it was a real fun conversation. I really enjoyed it. I think there's. Did you get any feedback at all?
Yeah, there was quite a few. I heard from a lot of different people, a lot of text messages and phone calls from people of all ages and all walks of life talking about how they enjoyed it and they learned a few things and it was good. It was good. It was a good experience.
I will say, so you're both are kind of just playing Tiff tonight. I'm just like all the stuff I would riff off of Tiff, I'm just going to riff off of you guys. And I had an interesting experience this week that I wanted to share. I didn't want to wait another week to talk about it. So her loss, but
yep.
But I actually, I've said over and over, one of the really cool things about doing this show is the people that reach out. Like we've had people from different states and strangers and, local people too that have reached out and just been like, hey, stumbled upon the show or someone told me about it. I had no idea I needed to hear all this stuff. I'm going through this, or I went through this 10 years ago, or even Joe, even your wife, told us that, some loss that she had suffered over a decade ago, just listening to the early episodes, brought a lot of stuff back. And she had told me that she wished that someone would have said that stuff to her in the real time, which, to me is the coolest thing about doing the show, is knowing that it's like, it's helping people, or at least getting to people in some way. That being said, this week I got a message from a total stranger, and as I'm reading through it, I'm thinking it's just one of those messages, another like, hey, thanks for the show type of message. And this girl had told me that she was a girl from town, and she had told me that she was walking on some trails here in town near the river, kind of over by Monroe, by where the liquor store is there.
Yeah,
And,
Parker's Woods and
she
all that, yeah.
actually happened to be walking with a friend who had just lost her sister. They were kind of just trying to clear their heads and, have a moment. And she saw a boat sticking out of the water, like a little toy boat. And for some reason, she said she just felt drawn to go. It was stuck on some rocks. And she went out, and she said, in the cold water up to her knees to pull this boat out of the water, and took a couple pictures of it, and went home. And a couple days later, looked at the pictures again and looked on Facebook to find the name of the person that was, because the boat had a name on it and a date, like a born and a deceased date on it. And it happened to be my mom's name that was on the boat.
Whoa, man.
And she looked my mom up on Facebook, found the page, did some deduction, realized I was my mom's son, reached out to me, and told me that she just wanted me to know that she found the boat, thought it was really cool, didn't know if it was me or someone I knew that did it, and that it was stuck on the rocks, and she put it back on its journey and just wanted me to know that she sent it on its way. And I reached out to my sister. That was the first person I could think of, because it wasn't my boat, and it was my sister that had done it. And she thought that was really cool. To go one further, I look at this girl's profile pictures on her Facebook, because we've got a few mutual friends. Wanted to see if Mason City, if you don't know somebody, you know someone that knows them. I 3 Facebook profile pictures in, she has a picture with the daughter of my mother's best friend, for that they were best friends their whole life.
Whoa, man.
So I reach out to this, and I've known the lady my whole life. We grew up together, almost like, like unofficial cousins kind of situation.
Sure.
And I'm like, how do you know this girl? And she's like, we've been friends for almost 20 years. She's been through the ringer with a lot of stuff. She knows my mom and knows my grandma, and has known us for a long time. And I'm like, holy shit. You know what I mean? Like, so wild.
Wow.
And
that's goose pimple stuff there, man. Whoa.
Yeah. And I'm hoping, she said she's going to be listening, and I'm hoping maybe that could be a fun episode, maybe.
Definitely.
Talk about like coincidences and things like that. And
you're just lucky it wasn't me walking there, because I've seen it and I know about boats and water.
Right.
I would have ran in the other direction. None of this would have happened.
Staying on them.
Seen Jaws too many times too, man. I ain't going anywhere near the water.
Oh man.
But that's what a cool metaphor for life, though.
Yeah.
We're cruising down the river of life, and like we get hung up on the rocks, and somebody else has to step in and help us get back on our path. That's pretty cool.
It is. And
not to mention all the cool.
Yeah.
Gosh, man, it's cool.
It was a pretty neat thing. I asked my sister, I was like, what made you decide to do that? Because she said she did it all on her own, and she said that mom really always liked to travel, and she thought that was a cool way to, so that was pretty cool. It was something this week that happened that, and it had nothing to do with the show. I thought, you know what I mean? It had to do everything to do with the grief I'm going through, but it had nothing to do with what I'm used to people reaching out to me about my mom for these days, which is them having heard the show. But
now I'm trying to figure out, okay, so that goes to the Winnebago, and then the Winnebago goes to, like, I want to find out where your mom's going.
Yeah, where's she headed? Is she going anywhere cool? South, I hope.
Well, yeah. Unless you get up to North Dakota, then you're headed north. But
we should have tagged it or something.
Geocaching.
Yeah, something.
That's crazy, man.
But who knows? Maybe, down the road, someone farther away will see it and do the same thing and reach out. Who knows? But that's kind of my story from the week. I thought I'd kind of share with you guys.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, for someone to take the time to even send you a message too, that's kind of unusual these days.
It was
to take a few minutes to type up an email or a Facebook message or something to you. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and she said she had lost a couple brothers young, and really appreciated like the celebration of life and the different things people do, in remembrance of people, and just felt compelled to reach out. And it's interesting.
You needed to hear that. At that
Yeah, how
cool.
things work out like that. Which kind of leads me to like maybe my first question for you is, what is some of like the neatest things you've seen as far as like tributes to people that are different than the norm? That if there's any been in your career that have stood out that someone did for a loved one that seemed extra cool to you, or just surprising, or
there have been a lot of cool things, and boy, the one that sticks out in my head, which is still every time I see this family member, I think of this all the time. This gal was that passed away. She was a mother of his kids, And I knew her kids kind of. I think one of her children was a year or two behind me, and another one a couple years ahead of me. And this lady was kind of really into the height of the Beanie Baby craze, and she had just crates of Beanie Babies. I don't know if it was just collecting for the fun or if it was when everybody was like thinking that was going to be the next, baseball card or whatever it was. And so when this lady died, what are we going to do with 500 Beanie Babies, And so they brought them to the funeral home. We had visitation and stuff, and they wanted everybody to pick one out when you leave and take one home with you. And anyway, we've got one of them still at the funeral home. We've got my grandmother's grandmother clock kind of at the top of our stairs when you come in of one of our places. There's a little bit of an office, and right as you look in the door, you can see the grandmother clock there. That was my grandmother's grandmother clock. And on top of this is this purple bear. And every single time that this gal comes in, she looks to see, yep, Mom's Beanie Baby's still there. I just thought that was kind of a cool way to kind of spread a little bit of joy. And
I remember those, man. Yeah. I had one that I think was like ended up being worth some money, but I gave it to a girl I thought was cute.
Yeah,
because she collected them. Like before they got worth money, it was one she didn't have, and then years later they're like, that one was worth. It was like a manatee. Okay. And it was like ended up being worth like a couple $100. And I'm like,
whoa,
man, because the girl didn't think I was cute. So you know what I mean? It never really panned out. So I was like, I should have kept that manatee.
Man.
Now, kind of tailing off that, I was thinking about rituals and some of the things I've seen at funerals, and I guess with, unfortunately, friends of mine that have passed away younger. Have you seen rituals happen more like at the funeral home or happening at the burial site? Because I remember one friend of mine passed away. For some reason, everybody started drinking whiskey at the gravesite and like pouring one out for the homies on the casket, which was weird. Like, is that, do you see that sort of thing? Or is that like my circle of friends is just degenerates?
Well, we're all degenerates in some way or another, aren't we? I've seen that kind of thing. It seems like it's just different groups of people have different things. I think no matter if you're from a traditional background, like a highly ritualized faith-based background, like for example, I was raised Roman Catholic and I kind of left that tradition and came back to it in adulthood. It's steeped in ritual. And a lot of us, even those of us who are in that, we miss a lot of the ritualistic side of things. But I think there's some kind of I don't know if it's our primitive brain or what, we look for meaning in some kind of ritual, and if we don't have one, we'll create one. If it's a balloon release, for example, or whether it's giving away Beanie Babies, or whether it's pouring one out for the homie, But I have seen that, and I think it's all good.
Is it good? Selfish though, in a way, or is it good selfishness that I feel I need to do this at this person's funeral?
Tiff and I talked about that before the last one. We were talking about like, she asked me if I felt guilty if I'm at a friend's funeral that I'm working at and I feel bad about it. And so I get exactly what you're asking, because you kind of feel like, who am I to have these feelings or these needs or desires?
Or am I taking too much attention away from the person that passed away by my actions?
Right. Boy,
isn't that kind of what it's about though, for the people mourning more than the person that's, being mourned for?
Right.
But then it comes down to, is everybody on the up and up? Is it one jerky uncle that's smashing whiskey bottles, or is everybody just in on the party? I think there are nuances, I assume. But
and there's some things that I think people could do that are inherently disrespectful, whether they intend them that way or not. But it's that's really tough. I don't know. I think if you draw some meaning or somehow connect with somebody through this, just like inside jokes. We've all got inside jokes. I could walk in here and you guys are talking about some kind of a joke that you have between you, and I'm going to be like, that's the weirdest thing I've ever heard. Or like, that's really out of left field, man. I don't know how I feel about that, but it's your thing. And maybe drinking a shot of Jack Daniels or whatever with this person was your guys' thing. And what better way to memorialize that person but by having one last drink with them, There are also other subsets of people that are maybe of different backgrounds that's a big part of their ritual within their culture or whatever it might be, to have a drink or to, do this or that. And I think it's great as long as the immediate family of the deceased isn't completely appalled or bewildered. Or
is there an appropriate way to act at a funeral? I mean, does it always end up kind of like a high school dance where you've got the fun-loving people on this side of the funeral home and the hardcore sad people on this side of the funeral home? Because I see that when I've gone to funerals where you've got, like, I'm going to try and keep it as lighthearted as possible because I can't get that sad right now.
Right.
And then you've got other people where everybody's just going up and here's another tissue.
Boy, is there an appropriate way? I don't know. I don't think so. I think, generations ago, maybe it was you got to dress a certain way or you got to wear black for 10 days or a year or put stuff over your windows. Or I think there's probably something to do with that at one time. I don't know anymore. I feel like we all experience each other different ways. That if your experience with this person was a fun, loving atmosphere, or you were buddies, or you were coaching your kids' soccer teams together or doing comedy together or something, that's going to be a completely different experience than this person's wife might have had. And I think that laughter is good. I think, a long time ago, oh, you don't dare laugh at a funeral, but you're remembering that person, and some of those memories might bring up laughter. They might bring up tears. They might bring up who knows what. I don't know. I don't think there's necessarily a truly appropriate way. There are maybe some things that you don't want to do. I think,
Don't show up hammered.
that was what I was going to say. Yeah. You want to be able to stand up straight and you don't want to be falling over each other and that kind of thing drunk. That would be one that I would be concerned about. I don't know. I say I don't know a lot, don't I? Because I just don't really know.
Joe's got the good questions.
Yeah.
He does this for a living, man.
Man,
Yeah.
you're grilling me. No, I'm
Well, I was just curious. I mean, but do you see that though, where you'll have maybe it's because you don't know everybody. Like if it's somebody that
Right.
knew a bunch of people
Right.
that are all coming to the funeral, everybody's kind of pocketed off in groups outside of
Right.
the viewing, or I don't even know the right word,
Right.
the
Visitation
ceremony.
time, yep.
Yeah, the ceremony part of it.
Do you know what a Venn diagram is? Do you remember
Yeah.
that from math?
Yep.
Those circles that interlock and stuff. That's all of us. We have some mutual friends, I'm sure, and we found out last time we have a lot of mutual friends and acquaintances. To me, I just met you. I know you in this context, but I wasn't a high school classmate of yours.
Right.
I wasn't. I'm not a. I mean, I'm a pretty funny looking guy, but I'm not a very funny guy as far as comedian goes. But comedy, and I could never make it on stage doing that kind of stuff. But like, we have these different pockets of relationships with different people. You might be a brother and a father and a husband and a son and a friend in different contexts. So I think people naturally kind of fall into those categories.
It is an interesting dynamic because it's like the story of one person's life, all the people they met or touched coming together one time,
Yes.
just for one time.
Yep.
Where some of those people might not before or after ever be in the same room for any reason other than they both knew that person, maybe separate of each other.
They might never have any other reason to
Yeah.
associate it ever before or after, other than through this person, this relationship.
Or
that they
I've
had.
even seen situations where you go to a funeral and you see somebody, like, for example, I had
I didn't know you knew him.
yep.
How do
cousin.
you guys know each
A
other?
kid I went to school with, my grandfather, I had no idea that he had so many like stepkids.
Okay.
And then like half, like he had a second and even a third marriage. And we weren't close, so I didn't know the full dynamic of that and all the grandkids and all this different stuff. And this kid I went to school with was at his funeral, and I was like, "How do you know my grandpa?" And he goes, "My grandpa." And I was like, "Our grandpa?" I'm just like, "What?" Like, huh? And we did the math and we figured out we were like, somehow cousins in some weird way, but
You don't have to give each other gifts.
yeah, no, yeah, we're not going to the same circle Christmases, but it also made me think like a lot of times, people do a lot of like, the picture books and collages or different tribute things to make, kind of tell the story of people's lives. I had an uncle who passed away who I didn't know he went to the Super Bowl until his funeral, because there was pictures he had taken with a Kodak camera when he went to the Super Bowl. It was the San Diego 49ers Super Bowl.
94,
49ers
95.
destroyed them, didn't
Yeah. And he went to that, and he had, apparently someone thought it was like, well, let's put out Uncle Pat's Super Bowl pictures. He'd like that. And So you know, I mean, a lot of people, you come in, you learn stuff about people, even if you knew them. And like, I imagine for you, I remember we talked about how, you know, when you first get with, you know, someone, you kind of have that moment of, you know, I'm gonna take care of you, and you know, and it's kind of a thing you do. Do you find that, like, is it a weird dynamic to get to know someone after they're gone, like over and over? Like, for example, like I never got to know Ethan, Tiff's son. I've just heard stories. I was at his funeral. I've gotten to know people that knew him and cared about him and kind of put together what kind of dude he was.
Right.
That happens to you over and over again.
Constantly. Yeah.
It's like reading Wikipedia, but real.
Right. Well, like I mentioned last time, Cliff's Notes. You know, I get to see all the high points. I get the ESPN Sports Center highlight reel of someone's life a lot of times, and it's just kind of boiled down to some of those milestone moments in their lives, and I get to hear some cool stories about when they went and saw Steve Young finally get the Super Bowl. They pull the what are you talking about, getting the monkey off his back after winning the Super Bowl? I mean, you get to hear some of these stories and experience kind of vicariously through them, and actually through the stories that a third person's telling you about them, which is even weirder dynamic if you think about it. A lot of what I'm learning about people is hearsay. You know, I didn't get to see it or touch it or be a part of it. In my communities that we serve, I know a lot of the people that I'm caring for. However, not everybody. And even with those, I didn't know so-and-so was played bridge or whatever it might be. I don't, you learn some things about that. So
Do you ever go, dang it, we could have been best friends?
Totally.
Yeah, that's
Like,
what I was
that-
going to say. You
that
ever
would've
like,
been
man, that guy
totally-
seemed cool. Like,
Totally. Absolutely. I do feel shortchanged sometimes.
Yeah.
I feel like, man, we would have got along great.
Right.
Or like, oh, they like to cook. I like to eat.
Yeah.
We should have hung out, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is a weird dynamic.
And to make it philosophical, maybe that's go meet more people. Go
Right.
talk to while they're alive. Who knows who you're going to find?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
take that as, for those
isn't
out
that
there
a good?
listening.
Isn't that a good lesson to pull from that? Really.
Why wait till somebody's dead to find out you would have been like A and B together?
Everybody's got such a cool story.
Right.
And I mean, when you really stop and think about it, like, you could sit down with just about anybody. And like, I remember, like, this has been a few years now, and I think it's gotten worse. But like 2012 was the last time I was out at Nyack, and I had a professor be like, go out today when you leave class and notice that every single person, as soon as they walk out of class, has their face buried in their phone until they get to their car, and
then
they're
they
gone.
still do.
Yep. Yeah. Right. That's a whole nother story. But it's like, if they would just look up, make eye contact with
Say
someone,
hello to somebody.
their new best friend or new girlfriend, or anything, any number of possibility relationships that you're shutting yourself off from, and like that was 9 years ago.
Yeah.
So I
What
mean,
a jaded perspective
Yeah.
of reality that can be when the birds are chirping, the fresh air is blowing, and here's people all around you. Absolutely.
it definitely gives you an interesting perspective when you go through grief, or like you see it every day, to be like, the things you wanted, you take for granted, like that, like just simple interactions, learning about people. I've thought about that with my mom. Like, I feel like I knew her very well, but anything that I don't know, I can't know now. She can't tell me stories anymore. You know what I mean? So
Other than through other people's stories.
sure. What just reiterates even more, do as much as you can with the time we have, so
Right.
it's kind of
That's like the biggest, I don't know if paradox is the right word of it all. We don't know how much time there is. We always kind of feel like, oh yeah, I'll get to that eventually, or I'm going to do this someday. When I retire someday, I'm going to do this, that, and the other. Well, who knows? There's no promises,
it's easy to forget, but
It is easy to forget. We do take a lot for granted.
yeah.
Now, when somebody's telling you stories about the person that's deceased, that the funeral is for, and maybe they're going to be one of the speakers there, do you ever have to coach anyone that's going up to speak? Because for a lot of people, it's not easy. It's like the biggest fear. You got
Absolutely.
speaking, then snakes, and then something else. So, but is that something that you have to do? Is like, that story you told me is great. That might be something that you want to share, because I think that will leave a good, lasting impression with everybody that's going to be here.
Yeah, I think that once in a while something like that will jump out of the conversation at me, and I'll go, that's we got to either put that in the obituary or we got to figure out how to capture that, because what a cool, unique story, or what just a cool experience that people can gain some knowledge from. But when we talk about like the sharing time, or if people are going to share stories or something during the funeral, then yeah, I do go into the whole, okay, you should have somebody break the ice, because there's nothing worse. The only thing worse than somebody getting up and speaking for 2 hours and not being able to ring them back in is when the pastor or whoever's emceeing or leading the service says, we'd like to open it up for people to share stories, and it's crickets. So I always try to say, if someone says we want to have a time of sharing where people can say whatever they want, I'll say,
Make sure you have someone.
Why don't you get 1 or 2 people that you know? Uncle Jerry is a really great speaker, or Justin's going to be there and he speaks in front of people all the time. Let's have him tell that funny story about the time you went to the restaurant and whatever happened, to kind of break the ice, because nobody wants to be first. But once you kind of get that going, it's pretty good. But sometimes just going into it cold, it's just really bad.
In comedy terms, book a couple features and leave some room for open mic spots.
Have you ever had to yank anybody off the podium, off the lectern, because either A, it got out of control in a bad way, or B, they were too overwhelmed with emotion and you just had to be like, hey, that's enough?
I personally haven't done that, but like maybe if a pastor is there, they can try to step in and pull somebody out of the deep end. What I always try to tell people who are going to speak, at least have something written out. Not that you want to get up there and read it verbatim off the page, but if you get lost or get hung up emotionally, Pastor Bob can come over and take it and can finish it for you.
Is it okay to swear?
Boy, it just depends on the context. It depends on the
But you don't have like a rule at the funeral home, or what if it's
No.
at a church? Like, is that I'm guessing that's a huge no-no.
But
it happens.
It happens. I would think it would be a no-no, but it happens. Sure it does. It has happened. Not frequently. You kind of got to know your
seems like
audience.
too, like when people are in the depths of like that much sorrow, like a lot of times, like I feel like decision making goes to the wayside.
Oh, yeah.
a
Sure
lot
it
of
does.
times. So like even like like you were talking about like coaching people to kind of like figure things out. Like maybe a lot of people I'm sure have just horrible ideas that they're not thinking, like, okay, so we're going to want to block off 90 minutes to, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
you just
I got to bring up the bachelor party in Vegas. No, you don't.
Yeah,
please don't.
That's
Yeah.
not what you want to do right now.
Right. Nobody wants to hear that right now.
There was
Yeah.
a certain clown that he really liked that he's gonna do balloon animals for a half hour. He would have really liked, no, let's just.
That would be a unique one I haven't had yet.
But like, it's just you're not your best. You know what I mean? I think that's why your job is so important, because you're just not your best when you're going through that. And
Definitely
you need
not.
someone to lead you through.
You got to lean on your cohort, as well as let me do some of that stuff for you. And if you've got something, what has come up before is we want to have this time of sharing, but we're afraid so and so is going to get up and tell the bachelor party story. That kind of thing is like, okay, if so and so stands up, tackle him, or whatever the case might be, or have Pastor Bob ready to step up to the microphone and say, thank you, everybody, for sharing, and move on. That's one of those things that, yeah, that's come up a few times, and it's more about what you don't want shared. Because even like the best man at the wedding, sometimes it's like, dude,
Bro, enough.
do everybody a favor, including yourself. Hold back. But the one thing that I'm going to go back to something here quick, Joe. When you talk about the inappropriate sharing or
Language.
that
Yeah.
kind of thing, what we've got going for us currently, and what I'm a big proponent of, visitation, which is that evening prior usually, where it's maybe a little less formal. So we kind of, if you look at most funeral/memorial services these days, you've got a service during the daytime hours, whether it's at the funeral home or at the church or at the country club or whatever it might be. And usually the evening prior is a little bit more of an informal gathering, kind of an open house kind of feel, people coming in, visiting, telling you these kind of stories, maybe on a one-to-one thing, a little bit more relaxed and maybe more free form versus, okay, we're going to start with Amazing Grace at 10:30. At 10:36, we're going to have the Lord's Prayer, that kind of thing. So it's that I think sometimes that evening prior visitation is a great opportunity for getting kind of diffusing those situations. Let that happen. or if you want to go home, go up to the OP after you're done at visitation and
Share
those stories,
there.
that might be the place to do it.
Have you ever had to, and maybe this is like the family's role, but you see somebody that's too overcome with grief at a funeral and tell them, maybe step outside, take a break. Is there protocol for that? Or is that's up to the aunts and the uncles and the brothers and the sisters to be like, dude, you got to step out of here for a little bit. Like this, I know it's healthy to grieve, but it's too much.
No, I don't think it's my place to do that. One of the things that we try to do, and I think a lot of funeral homes do this, especially coming in to see your mom the first time, that kind of thing. I want to have that happen in a private environment.
More controlled.
You can come in. There's nobody else here. The non-judgmental. I'll take you to the door. If you want me to come all the way in with you, I will. But you go in there and you do whatever you want to do. I'm going to come check on you in 10 minutes. And that, seems like that anticipation of that moment has got to be just overwhelming. I can imagine. And we talked a little bit about that last time. But a lot of times I want that energy release to happen, but it's when do you want it to have happen? That private time, I think, is usually when it naturally occurs, before the public starts coming. I don't think I would ever. I can't anticipate a time where I would try to pull somebody away. You see the people trying to crawl in the casket on TV and things like that. I've seen that a few times.
What?
Their husbands in the casket. They want to just go with them or whatever the case might be. I have not seen that in person, maybe once or twice ever, and where they're so overcome, and that's maybe where somebody else would step in and kind of help that person.
Kind of a
I can't
herd
imagine
mentality kind of situation.
Yeah, I can't imagine how.
I do remember there was a hour, almost like a last kind of visitation at the funeral before the funeral actually started, as they were seating people. And
Yep.
I had said the first episode that during the visitation I was just glued to the casket. I couldn't be pulled away. I was the same way that next morning at the funeral, and my best friend, who was one of the pallbearers, he was the best man at my wedding. He knows me very well. It's funny because some of my wife's coworkers later on said, like, who is the big guy hovering over your husband like he was like CIA or something? Like, did that guy work for the funeral home? And it's like, no,
that's just his personal handler.
Right. And that was how he felt he needed to be there for me. But there was a moment, and again, I wasn't having any like huge, like overwhelming, like freak out, tip the casket, jump in at any type of moments, but I was very upset. And he's like, let's take a minute, let's walk away, let's go. And I flat out, I was like, no, I can't. And he read me and he let me stay, but like, I think that it's hard to person to person. It's hard to know, what they need or what. So, you know what I mean? Like for me personally,
Did you feel offended that he was approaching you?
I knew what
You knew what was going on.
And he got a little pushy because he knew that I was, where I was and that he thought I needed it. But once I was stern, and I was like, dude, I need to be here. And he's like, okay. He understood. I think I knew that his sole purpose was to try to get me, calmed down. And that's how he thought it needed to go down. But like I said, it's just, everybody's different. Everybody's got, some people don't want to be anywhere near it. You know what I mean? And I couldn't be pulled away. But so, that's, to answer the question you didn't ask me, I feel like, like that is an interesting situation because it's like, when do you make that, even as a relative of
when you make
person,
that call?
Yeah. When do you make that
hey, we're going to take a halftime, grab a Sprite. You know what I mean? And then we'll get back to bawling your eyes out.
What's the line?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's an interesting question for sure.
Because I mean, I feel like I would be that guy that might step in at the wrong time and just be like, hey, maybe you need a break.
Yeah.
Come.
Even though you mean well. You know what I mean? Yeah. So.
Another question that I've got. Money at funerals. Mm-hmm. Is that weird to anybody else that you give money to somebody because the relatives died?
No,
I mean, to me, it's a little weird.
to me, it seemed a little weird too, but I'm interested to hear what Mike's take is.
yeah, I don't ever know what's in those cards. Thankfully, I don't want to know what's in the cards that people bring. The only time that happens is if somebody sends a card and they don't put a name of a family on it, and it's like, oh, I have to open the card, and there's $10 in here. Okay, take a video of me opening the card, to my staff. I don't want them to think I switched the 20 for a 10 or whatever. I think it's a couple of different things. I think it has, to some degree, has replaced the flower thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's also a recognition that there's an expense factor with funerals, or there's an idea that, hey, this family maybe will make a donation to the, I don't know what,
Audubon Society
on behalf of so and so. It's, instead of sending flowers, I think it's the money thing. I think that's what it is. It's not like hey, you graduated from high school, here's $20 to pay towards your tuition next year. It's more about, here's some dollars. Maybe you can do something with it. Maybe you all could use it to defray some of the cost of the expense of the funeral, or you can give it to the Audubon Society or whatever the case might be. I haven't really thought about that much. Maybe it's because I grew up around it. I don't know.
I get the point of it. The point being, we're here to help you out with, obviously this is not free.
Right.
There's a cost associated with everything we're seeing, but it's always felt like some sort of weird twist on a Goodfellas movie. Like, hey, sorry about your dad.
Right.
Let me shake your hand and give you a crumpled up 20.
Grease the palm
Yeah.
a little bit. Yeah.
And I mean, to me, it's from an outsider perspective on it, weird, but I get it.
Yep.
It's one of those rituals. Like, how did it start?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Where did that first begin? And who was that person that said, what would make this situation better? $15.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Here's what I got. This is
But I think part of it is too. It makes the giver feel like they're
Doing
contributing
something?
Yeah.
when they just have no idea what to do.
Yep.
That'd be the first guy that did it. It's like, I don't know. Here's a 20.
Let's see how this goes.
I don't know what else to say.
Yeah.
I have
And
no
I have
idea.
to assume some interesting situations come up depending on the family dynamic. For me, for example, for those that have listened to the show a lot know, there's a lot of contention between me and my mother's husband. And it was really no secret to those that knew us. And I had several people approach me that handed me cards personally that were like, listen, I want to make sure this goes to who I want it to go to.
Right.
And I have to imagine that there's even crazier situations than mine where people are like, oh man, I want to give this, but where do I put it to make sure it doesn't, you know what I mean?
Right.
So,
And are you supposed to pool that money as a family?
Yeah, right.
Or
Yeah.
what do you do?
I think sometimes people will write in the card, this is intended to do this. Or, this, we were going to make a donation to the Audubon Society, but we want you to know we did it. Here's $20. If you decide you have a greater need elsewhere. I really think the beginning of it probably has to come back to, in the old days, maybe it was flowers, maybe it was bringing food, bringing a lasagna to the house,
right.
Whatever the case might be. I don't bake lasagnas, so here's $20. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't like flowers, so here's $20.
The dish I'd never get back to you is worth $20, so I might as well just cut that all out.
Yep.
Here's $20.
Yeah. I think so. I really think I assume, I really don't know what the origin of that was, but I think that's probably got something to do with it. I really do.
Do you sell sympathy cards at the funeral home?
We do not.
Do you give them away? Do you even have them there?
We have envelopes
Okay.
they're memorial envelopes. If someone has $20 they want to give the family and they don't have anything they didn't buy a card, there's the envelope sitting there by the register book where people sign in the book, and they grab one, they put their name on it or whatever the case might be. They stick their $10 or $20, whatever it is, lick it shut, and put it in the pile with the other cards.
I've got a dumb idea that may be brilliant. Can I bring this up? Because
Yes.
these are the two people right here in front of me that need to either A, approve this idea or tell me it's horrible. What if the greeting card companies set up a kiosk in the funeral homes and gave the funeral home a cut of the greeting cards? Like, it could be even
Like
a vending
spinner
machine.
or something.
That'd
Yeah.
be interesting. That's nice.
Because we have
Yeah.
them in like in post offices and stuff, just a spinner with a handful of.
So why not
cards
have
and-
that there, because I'm a guy, I forget things,
Yep.
and I don't want to grease the palm. I'd rather, get a card, just swipe your credit card, $8, because, you're in a
You might have just
self-contained
come up with
environment.
something there, Joe.
Yeah, and we've got it right here on tape. So it's
Yeah.
my idea, Joe
Yep.
Malone. So yeah,
We might have to cut this out because we don't want anybody to know about
Yeah,
it
yeah,
first,
it's
until we get something
patent
protected. Yeah, I don't know.
or would that be uncouth?
No, I don't think so, because there's some funeral homes that have like gift shops or whatever, or like with like
What?
Oh yeah, they have like memorial stones. Like like you walk into the hospital here in Mercy, you walk in and there's a coffee
that
kiosk
kinda
and there's like a
I thought you had like
No.
the so and so funeral home shot glass.
No.
and tiny spoon.
no, but they might have like a,
Keychains with pictures of the deceased.
now that's a good
my
idea.
goodness.
No, it's like they might have a little corner in the front of the building that's if you want to buy a balloon or something, I don't know, or a stuffed animal, and or there's places that do that. We don't do that.
When you go to an amusement park and they take a picture of you on the roller coaster, after you walk out of the funeral, you can buy a picture of you at the casket.
My best friend died, and all I got was this T-shirt.
Oh my gosh, you guys are crazy. Hey,
Oh,
I
this
think
is,
the greeting card's better than
this
that.
is what
Yeah.
happens when Tiff leaves us unsupervised. This
oh, she's going to listen back to this and go, "What the heck?"
is quality podcast right here, guys.
Man, oh man.
I got a question since we're a little loose here.
You got
a little
lots of good
loosey.
questions. I love them, Joe.
Forgive me if I'm taking
Dude,
over
no,
too
I'm
much.
so glad
Okay.
to have you here, Joe. Absolutely.
Funeral conventions, is that a thing? Because it seems like every industry has a convention, whether it's washing machines, radio. We have conventions that people go to. Is there a funeral home convention? Are there casket salesmen? Like, is that a thing? And how much have you lost at blackjack during one of those?
I stay away from the casinos.
Okay.
I'm not a gambling guy, man. It's just very rarely. I've never won anything. I've got a casino story to tell you when the recording shut off. But yes, there are conventions. One of every state has their own regulations, their own requirements for our license. In Iowa, our license is through the Department of Public Health, and whoever has determined that we have to do so much continuing education every 2 years to maintain our license in Iowa. And so one of the things that we can do to do that is, there's an Iowa Funeral Directors Association, which we're members of. There's a National Funeral Directors Association that we're members of. And they do all sorts of different educational. They do a lot. This last year has been great. I love it. We can sit at home on the computer
Zoom
and
it.
oh man, it's awesome. And but there's a lot of in-person stuff there. And usually at those conventions, there's vendors that are check out our new stuff, whatever it might be, whether it's chemical companies or casket companies or whatever it might be.
Do they do
colleges?
like drop your business card in to win a thing?
Yeah, I don't do that stuff anymore, man. And I get tired of people calling all the time, trying to sell us something. We're not in the old days, it was a very product driven business. And anymore for us especially, we don't care about any of that. It's just service, service. You want to buy a casket or an urn? Great, I can get you one. If you want a purple and gold Vikings urn, I can get you one.
I know a guy.
Yep. But yeah, so
during cocktail hour, are funeral directors good to hang out with?
oh man, we went to one. I went to one. I was an intern yet, so I was through school. I'd passed my national board exam, and then in Iowa, I had to do a year of internship under the tutelage of a licensed director who has gone through certain hoops to become a preceptor. And my dad, I'm very blessed that my dad, who's been licensed now 50 years, I mentioned, he has always believed in like higher education, whatever it is. If you're going to be a baseball hat making guy, you should learn how to be the best baseball hat making guy you can be. So he's always believed in that. And so there's a guy in Springfield, Missouri, who is the world's foremost pioneer of like restoration of traumatized remains. He's unbelievable, some of the stuff he's done. And so he's had his own school, his own academy at his place. And then at one point he decided to have an international conference that took place over the course of a weekend. And we went to the very first one when I was an intern. And it was over the course of a weekend. We had like 18 hours of class, and each person talked for maybe an hour about different things and from all over the world. It was incredible. But when it was over, the very first night, I remember they were scrambling. We drank the hotel dry. But we had people from all over the world that are on call 24 hours a day, and suddenly we're all together, 110 of us or whatever it was, or 150 of us from 4 continents or 5 continents, and over the weekend, and it was crazy. It wasn't rambunctious or anything. We're heavy tipping and well behaved. You know, you're a lot of sir and ma'am.
Sure.
You know, but when you want to let your hair down a little bit, you know, that tends to happen sometimes. You know,
So you're talking about this guy's the best in the world at making people presentable. Was he showing slides? How did the waitress staff handle?
They didn't see any of that.
Oh,
stuff.
okay. They weren't like coming in and filling up water and
No.
like, what is going on?
No,
here?
they weren't. Nope.
Okay.
Yeah, that was something that, you know, in our line of work is very sensitive, as you can imagine.
Sure.
So yeah, there's none of that.
I could see
happening.
if you didn't know what was going on, that you'd be like,
Right.
I got to go home.
I could also tell you though the wait staff was staying as far away as they could. You know, when we were in class, you know, they didn't want to accidentally see something they shouldn't. You
Sure.
know, so,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned people from all over the world
Right.
were at this thing and go
Right.
to, it did, at least up until recently, you know, come together and do this. Do they do things differently as funeral directors in, for instance, Poland versus Iowa?
Absolutely.
And it's all based on customs?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And are there any similarities that you found that like everybody, and everybody obviously developed, I'm guessing, generalizing these traditions independently. Is there anything that is shared by different cultures across the world?
Sure. Yeah. Boy, that's really broad, Joe. I'm trying to think if you could
Okay,
boil
well,
it down for. But yes,
Bad question.
No, it's a very great question. I just can't go in all the nuance of it. Absolutely. What you got to look back and say what forms these traditions? Probably, you know, cultural things, religious things. You know, if it's within a certain group ethnically in a certain subsection of Eastern Europe or something, maybe they really strongly believe in this or that or whatever the case might be. For instance, you know, I have a dear friend who I've become a dear friend with who's from Ireland, and they still do wakes in the house. So someone dies, and in that country, everybody is autopsied,
Okay.
no matter what. It's my understanding. And then they come to the funeral home, they prepare the body, and they take the body to the house. And then maybe the body's at the house for 2 or 3 days. Then the funeral director comes back for the body, and then they take it to the church and do the funeral, and then they bury or cremate or whatever the case might be. So that's just something that they do in Ireland or in England. You know, very similar between England and Ireland, as I understand. So,
Would you want the body in the house for 3 days? I honestly,
embalmed, absolutely no problem.
I don't know. I've never, at least as an adult, lost somebody that I feel like I would want
I
them
understand the
there in my house for 3 days.
But I suppose, you know, if culturally it's something you've always grown up with.
That's just what you do.
Yeah.
Then that's what you do.
Well, go back to your experience.
Right.
Would you still be standing there if you could be?
No, it's hard to tell. There's a good chance, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, these cultural things or these regional things, even within Iowa, there's regional things. Within the Midwest, you know, different. It's manifold, man. That's why I just like, oh man, where do I start?
And not to say that it's, you know, strange or whatever. I mean,
No.
it's strange to me.
No,
you know,
absolutely.
And it's one of those things where, you know, if I was in that situation, I don't know what I would do.
Right.
You know, I guess if culture dictates that's what you do, then that's what you do.
That's what you do, right?
Something I thought surprised me is we went to the Caribbean for my honeymoon, the Virgin Islands, and they
Weird brag, but okay, go.
yeah right yeah, no, yeah I get around. It's the one cool vacation I've ever been on ever.
Joe and I are like, man, you suck. Man,
But
we want to go.
they bury all their deceased above ground because of all the flooding and everything, and they don't want to lose people. So I assume there's lots of different things that go along with that is different than what we, you know what I mean?
You have that in maybe New Orleans a little bit too.
Sure, yeah, I suppose so. So I mean, yeah, I'm regional, even like geographically, I'm sure has a lot to do with it.
Sure, absolutely. I get to know a pastor who's retired now, but they were in, I don't remember what island it was in that region of the world, and I think the soil or the rock, bedrock was all volcanic, whatever, and it was incredibly difficult to dig graves. I mean, it was a lot of physical work to be able to open a grave. So they reused graves, or I can't remember all the different things they talked about they did, but it was just would be shocking to us. It's just different.
I have to make it work.
But that was what dictated in that case was their geography, or their environmental.
What other choices do they
Right.
have, right?
Does the funeral director have to stay in the person's house for 3 days?
Boy, I don't know.
In Ireland? Yeah.
Like,
I don't know.
Do you get a couch, or do they have like a separate room?
That's a great question. I have no idea. But if you think about, funeral home evolved from funeral parlor,
Which is that.
the parlor in front of your house. And so if the old school funeral homes, and if you look at a couple of places here in town or around the area, this one of the biggest houses in the area, big old overbuilt home with a big front parlor. And, once funerals came, or wakes or visitations came from out of the house because they didn't want them in the house for 3 days, then, or they lived in a walk-up apartment, there was no parlor, they would use the funeral parlor, which is kind of just evolved into, now they're very modern, sleek, no steps. It's just different. Things are different.
When I learned the difference between the two, like what a funeral parlor was to what it evolved into, today, was that movie, what is this? With Macaulay Culkin, where he gets killed by the bees.
We talked about it last time.
My Girl. Yeah, that, because that was a funeral parlor in their house, and that was the first time I ever saw
That's
like.
right. She was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and instead of just it was supposed to take place back in like the 50s or something
Right.
like that, and I remember being a kid and being like, oh, that's different than that was the first time I realized the difference between the two, but. Learning things through modern
Things have just
cinema,
evolved.
right?
Well, and through Hollywood's eyes, who knows?
Sure.
Yep.
But
I got another question I want to ask you, Mike.
Yeah.
You do a lot, as we've talked about, before a funeral. Working with people on putting together maybe the program or the obituary, stuff like that. Obviously, very busy during the funeral, making sure that everything is tended to. After the funeral, do you ever have contact with a family, with someone that's still grieving? Like, is that a thing, or is
Yes.
that not a thing where people will come back, or you'll reach out to see how they're doing as a funeral director?
That's kind of what we referred to earlier. That's what in our nomenclature you call aftercare. And as I've said, I believe most funeral homes are lacking in that, partially because there's so much emphasis on what's happening right now. I've got to take care of this family right now. But I think as time evolves, that's a bigger thing, because so many people, it's not over at the cemetery or at the funeral home. We got to be able to meet people where they are and continue to walk with them wherever they are. And so, yeah, we've done quite a bit with that, and we are working on that strangely as we speak. Yeah. I think there's a great opportunity to better serve people in that capacity after the fact. For those that don't not want it.
And
double
maybe
negative in there.
and whether that's somebody that maybe doesn't have a strong support circle around them.
Absolutely.
And they've got no one else. Like, their one person is gone.
Absolutely.
Who
right.
am I supposed to talk to now?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It could be lonely in the middle of the night or in the evenings or on the weekends when someone goes away. The rest of the family's got their activities or whatever. It can be lonely. And that person maybe is susceptible to depression because of that, or whatever the case might be. We are not counselors. We're not trained counselors in that traditional sense. But, we try to maybe identify and plug people into systems of a sharing group that maybe meets once a week, and they can visit about their common loss, or they try to help someone start a podcast where they can talk about
Right.
there's all sorts of, it's so manifold, it's so broad, but trying to figure out where can we continue to serve this family well after the funeral, in what capacity. And so there's tremendous need there as far as I'm concerned.
And it's probably hard to pinpoint down because, speaking from personal experience, as you go through it, you don't always know what you need.
Right.
And you might be a few months in or a year in, and something hits you, and you're like, okay, well, that's new. You know what I mean? Like, I got through Thanksgiving and Christmas, and it was tough. But then Mom's birthday happened, and that was way tougher than Thanksgiving
That's what you're saying,
and Christmas.
yeah.
And then I just had my birthday, and that was, there was some struggle there too.
Absolutely. You would have always probably had dinner with your mom or something.
Yeah, she always called me first thing in the morning, and it's things that just become very, very real all of a sudden,
Well, to kind of talk about that and to maybe to further expand on your question, Joe, imagine, I'm going to pick on you as an example. Who's the point of contact for the funeral home in your family, in your mom's circle?
Well, I would like to think it's me. My stepfather handled all the stuff financially, but he's not really very reliable. The funeral director definitely relied back on me a lot for most.
I'm glad that
he saw the situation very clearly and
I'm glad to
handled
hear that.
it well. Yeah,
I'm glad to hear that. But if you think about, let's just say that maybe he didn't identify that well.
Mm-hmm.
His primary connection to your mom's family, it's probably your stepfather,
right?
And maybe we missed the son or the grandson or the cousin or the sister or whatever it is, because with a death, it's one person. But when you get into that family, my dad's one of 7 children, for example. When my grandmother died, maybe my dad was fine and my one aunt was fine, maybe my other aunt wasn't fine. How do you gauge that? How do you see that, perceive that?
When you don't know each person's individual relationship. And,
right.
Yeah.
We sit down at a table to make funeral arrangements. It might be 2 or 3 members of the family, and then come the day of the funeral, there's 35 in the family. Well, I don't have that connection with everybody. How am I going to identify that?
Right.
It's a challenge. It's really
I
hard.
imagine so.
How do you do that? Is there anybody that needs something? We try to put that, please call me if you need something, but how do I do a better job of gauging that and driving down and finding that person 2 generations down and one generation over is the person that's really struggling and needs something without letting it fall through the cracks? That's really hard.
Or you go to the wrong person and they're like, "You're being super creepy. I'm fine."
Or two family members that come to you with completely contradicting things they want done.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a whole write-up of that kind of thing. Go ahead.
Did you talk about funeral planning at all in the last episode? I don't remember.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Not a ton.
Because that leads in, I wanted to ask about that. So you have 2 people with 2 different ideas of what their loved one would want. How important is planning a funeral in advance? When should someone do that? If you're 41, slightly overweight, but pretty dang healthy beyond that, should I be planning my funeral right now? Is it like a will?
When I tell you about I would tell you, because I'm incredibly biased, naturally. I want to put that out there right in front. I see it every day. I believe in whatever it is you're going to do, you should do some planning. If you're going to go to the Virgin Islands for your honeymoon, you should have a hotel room before you go.
Right.
Before you get on the plane, right? Mm-hmm. Most people spend more time planning something like that than they do what do I want, or what I often tell people in a group setting or in an individual setting, what don't you want?
Do not playlist at a wedding.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we had that at ours.
That sort of thing. Yeah.
I said I had two rules at our wedding. I said I really don't want any country. Someone snuck one in there, and I said, if you play with open arms, I swear there'll be a riot here. I do not want. I can handle a little bit of Steve Perry, and he's a great singer, but I don't want it. That was the only,
my
only
special
two.
day.
Yeah, please. Other than that, if you wanted, I told my wife, if you want to do the chicken dance and all that stuff, great. No with open arms. Mm-mm. So anyway, but yeah, sometimes what you don't want is as important to you to get across as what you do want. What do you want to eat tonight? Well, I know I don't want that. As opposed to, how many times you had that conversation with your wife?
Where should we go? Yeah.
I don't care. Well, how about this? No, I don't want that. Okay, well, you're drilling down. I guess my attitude about it is anything you can do to try to help your wife, your children.
Lessen the burden? Is that the right thing?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Whether I think about pre-planning from the perspective of there are substantial items, which is like the do not play list, or the I want chicken salad at the funeral lunch, or I don't want this or don't want that. Those are the substance of what you want or don't want that you need to make known in some way. And then there's also an opportunity from a financial perspective to pay ahead. Most funeral homes will offer a prepaid guaranteed price funeral where you would you could either start paying on it now. If you say, this is what I want, Mike, what would it cost? Well, today it's going to cost you this much money, but you're 41 years old. Chances are you're maybe not even halfway through life yet. What's it going to cost?
When you're 80.
80. Well, what we can do if you want, we can do a prepayment thing where you're locking today's price. Most funeral homes are offering that. And
You're like, what a sucker waiting until you're almost dead to pay for your funeral. I got mine half price because I bought.
I'm telling you, if you start doing the math on it, it's way better than half price.
I will say that my grandmother, when she passed away, she had everything done. She had her casket picked, everything picked out, paid for, done. And it made it so that we could just focus on saying goodbye.
Yep.
And there wasn't all that decision making, and I know it made it a lot easier on my mom for sure.
The decisions are going to have to be made.
Yeah, at some point.
Now,
why not do it when you're of sound mind?
When the emotion's out of it a little bit.
Yeah. As morbid as it might seem,
it's just like any
we
other
can't
decision.
escape it.
Is that a thing you have to get notarized, or can I just have like a thing in my wallet that says when I die, make sure Dark Side of the Moon gets played in its entirety?
Right on.
Or,
I like
or is it like a will? Because I think a will, you have to have some sort of legal documentation to it. Or is a funeral just like, well, this is what I want. I wrote it down.
State by state, there's different laws, and I can only speak to what's in Iowa because I don't have a license in Minnesota or in Arkansas or whatever the case might be. I will tell you a couple things. I've never had anybody walk into the funeral home and say, I really wish Dad hadn't done this prearrangement. I wish he would have let us decide. No one's ever said that in my 12, 13 years, whatever it's been. So there's that. Notarizing, that kind of thing. A will is a legal document, of course, and I'm not an attorney, so I can't get into that too much. But yeah, you can't just write it on the back of a napkin. I don't think you got to have it registered or notarized, or whatever the case might be. Some people think a will is good enough for funeral arrangements,
but it's different.
It's different. I think you could include funeral wishes in your will if you were so inclined. That being said, you might not look at the will until after the funeral's over. If it's a holiday, or if the attorneys, most people don't look at the will until,
or you didn't know they had one,
or they didn't know they have one, and then 2 weeks later you open the safety deposit box at the bank, and this is what I really want, kind of a thing. What my folks used to do is they would say, if something happens to us, the top drawer of the dresser, there's a manila envelope with who you need to call to do this. And it was some businessy type stuff, as well as some funeral wishes or desires or whatever the case might be. I definitely want this. I definitely don't want that. There wasn't with my folks, even though my dad's been a funeral director for 50 years, there wasn't tremendous detail about what he did or didn't want. I kind of have some ideas based on what just being around him and within funeral service. But I think it's important to at least, even if you don't want to have that conversation with your wife or your kids, just if nothing else, say, hey, honey, there's an envelope on the top drawer of my dresser with some general things. I want Dark Side of the Moon played in its entirety. I would be at that funeral, man. That's awesome. That's one of my favorite records of all time. And have some of that stuff written down. In Iowa, the next of kin, the authorizing agent is the term that's used. We can get into who has the right to decide on that in a moment here, but they have to ratify whatever your prearrangement is. Because once you die, you lose your authority.
You don't exist legally.
Right.
Yeah.
With the exception of one thing. And I'm going to get the year wrong, and I'm sure there's going to be other funeral directors going to listen to this and screaming at me. I want to say it's the Uniform Anatomical Gift Act of 1994, for example. It's a federal law that states if somebody is registered as a organ donor or as a anatomical donor, which there's a difference, we can get into that if you want to, by law, the next of kin or the authorizing agent cannot
change that.
Okay. However, some of those organizations that do that kind of work usually want to honor the wishes of your family. So with that in mind, your 14-year-old daughter goes to get her learner's permit, and someone behind the counter at the DMV says, you want to be an organ donor? Yeah.
law?
Yeah, of course I do. Guess what? You can't. That's a minor, but you still. That's my only issue with that. But it's a federal law, that kind of thing. But in Iowa, you could have everything prearranged, and your wife could say nope, and there's nothing anybody can do about it by law. So,
Wife's always getting the final word.
well, yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
However, there is a law or act or whatever. It's in Iowa code, probably 10, 15 years old, where you can name somebody in writing as your legal designee for final disposition purposes, which would usurp or completely bypass the normal hierarchy of who has the right to decide what happens, and place whoever you named above all others. That was kind of pre-marriage law changes in Iowa, where someone maybe who was married, maybe it was a same-sex partner, maybe it was a common law situation that wasn't recognized by the state of Iowa at the time.
Wouldn't have that right
Wouldn't have
without
the
that
right.
rule. Okay.
This person's been your partner for 40 years. Tough darts. You have no legal rights to anything. So what this law allowed is, among other things, you could name anybody and put them at the paramount point of the hierarchy. They can decline it if they want to, but it's there.
But another reason to maybe think about that stuff ahead of time.
Right.
Have you ever talked about your funeral? What you want done?
I haven't really. No.
'Cause,
I mean, I've
we're
talked.
not like old enough to
Yeah.
do that. Honest, I don't feel.
I like to think I'm not old enough. Yeah. I mean,
And you're like,
but-
when you're 10, you're old enough to do it.
No,
You know,
I'm not saying that so much, but I think before you retire, you should have a plan in place.
Sure.
It's part of to me, it's part of an estate planning situation. Now, many of us are going to work till the day we die. That's just the way it is. But it's part of your retirement. You maybe have made some investments. Maybe you've got Social Security. Maybe you got your house paid off. Maybe you got these plans. I think it should be part of that. I don't think I don't believe the government should step in and tell you should have to do it. But I just think it's a good idea.
a good choice to
Yeah.
have. I got one last question, then I'm out of questions.
Sure.
What's the sweetest casket you've ever seen?
Sweetest casket I've ever seen.
Either being used in its intended purpose, or we're back to getting drunk with Polish funeral directors, and this is one of the caskets on display, like a Kiss Army casket, a
seen those.
Buzz
They're
Lightyear
cool.
casket. I don't, what's one where you're like, whoa, I might want to get buried in that.
I'm a wood guy. I play guitar, man. I have a Les Paul. It's mahogany. I like mahogany. It's the king of woods in the casket world, which is weird. I've seen some really cool mahogany caskets. They weigh a ton. I weigh a ton. So it's gonna take some extra pallbearers to carry me in that sucker if that's what happens. The one you always see on TV on the celebrity funerals, that's the same casket in every one of them. It's a highly polished bronze casket. Looks like gold. Michael Jackson and
Not like the same one.
not like literally the same one.
Okay.
It's always the
I
same
was
model.
like, oh, okay.
It's
I
always
was
the
like,
same model.
You just gave us a big Hollywood scoop.
Yeah.
No, there's one casket.
No, it's like it's the
Whatever make and model.
Yeah.
the Air Jordan.
it's the Air. Excellent, thank you. It's the Air Jordan of caskets that you always see at the celebrity funerals. Either that, or it's like after Kennedy was killed, that mahogany casket was like, it was called the presidential mahogany, and it was the one that all the heads of state and so on were buried in, because it was the most famous casket in the world, because there's pictures of it everywhere with a little kid, saluting the casket and all that kind of stuff. Sweetest casket, I don't know. I mean, there's been some. We've seen some custom stuff. There's a company in Minneapolis that kind of does some custom stuff. Turnaround time and that's our biggest challenge. Is turnaround time with these things. We can.
So if you want a sweet casket, you got to pre-plan.
You should.
Call back.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's. Yeah, most of the model stuff that are made are pretty. A lot of them are generic interior now, like they're gender neutral colors and these kind of things, because they're more. I don't know. They're more universally appealing, I guess. People are less risque about picking wild colors, I think, than they used to be. That's a good question. I've seen some cool stuff. The Kiss ones are cool. They're cool. Dimebag Darrell, I think, is buried in his
Yeah,
casket.
very cool. And I remember 1993 when The Undertaker built the casket for the Ugandan giant Kamala to bury him in the casket match that they had at Survivor Series. I thought that was pretty cool till I saw real caskets at real funerals and realized the craftsmanship on that thing wasn't very impressive, really.
For some reason, I thought this was going to lead into throwing Mankind off the top of the cage.
Through the cage.
I can make
Through the
any
cage.
story come back to pro wrestling
Yes,
if you give me
man.
enough time. And
And I believe
effort.
that was 94 when he threw Mankind off the cage.
Yeah, right.
So,
As a matter of fact,
Was it SummerSlam or what was that?
yeah. Oh, man, that's a different podcast.
Hell in a Cell.
But,
Hell in a Cell. Yeah, okay.
yeah.
Man,
But,
we are dating ourselves,
yeah.
guys. We're all about the same age. It's pretty. I'm 41, so I mean,
that's a whole
that's
other
crazy.
podcast.
Yeah,
But
I don't know. It's,
I will say, thanks for coming back a second time.
yeah, it's been great.
Obviously, we had more to talk about.
It's great
You know what I
questions,
mean?
Joe. Both of you
Joe,
guys.
yeah, that you thought of stuff that I wouldn't have thought of. So I think this is going to be a really fun episode for people to listen to. Is there any last thoughts or things that you'd like to get across? You know, with the platform, as long as you've got it here. And
I don't care what it is in life, whether it's vacationing, whether it's looking into a career. More information is always better. You know, most funeral homes, most funeral directors are glad to sit down and visit with you about questions you have. Get your questions answered. Get some kind of thing written down, Joe. You know, it's a gift to your family to have some of that stuff done. I think your mom would tell you that about your grandmother's situation.
yeah, I think it really made it easier for her.
You know, we had a situation where a lady did all this and at an elderly age picked out every nuance, every detail, and paid for it. And she had lost 2 of her 3 children. And when the third child came in, when mom died, he was just blown away that she has this done. And he didn't have to, all he had to pick out was what day the funeral was going to be. And what a sense of relief. That's really struck with me. Man, I just thought, wow, you know, what a gift to give this guy who was beside himself. So it's going to happen. Someone's going to make the decisions. I'm banging the drum for prearranging now. So I'm descending from the pulpit for that one, from the soapbox, but that was what I would tell you. That's my last thought.
I think as someone who's, you know, still going through grief currently, and to think back of, you know, going through everything, it's hard enough, you know, and if it's less to worry about, I think that I agree. You know what I mean? I've never been in an exact position to have to do that, obviously, but I hope more and more people realize that, because you use the word gift. I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Because it's like the hardest thing you're going to go through a lot of times. And usually the person that has to make those decisions is the person that was more often than not closest to that person. And chances are they're going through it harder than a lot of other people, yet they're the ones that have to make those decisions.
That's true.
So, yeah, I think if that's the educational part that, you know, aside from all the other stuff that we've learned, you know, like taking something to take forward is to our listeners is think about that, you know, think about what you'd want. You know, it's a party you can't be at, but you can have a part in,
That's true.
you can have a part in planning it.
Yep.
You know what I mean? You can make sure the people that you care about are you know, doing it the right way.
Right.
So, again, thanks for coming.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's great.
We definitely appreciate it. Joe, thanks again for sitting in.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Tiff, we miss you, but I think we proved that we're perfectly capable gentlemen that can handle an hour podcast.
Hope we did you
So
proud.
we did too. I have no doubt. For those listening, we appreciate you. Keep, you know, sending in the letters. Keep letting us know what you think of the show. Any ideas you might have. We love hearing from people. Again, thanks to my guests Mike Ewing and Joe Malone. And until next week, guys, hang in there.